Good morning, good afternoon, or whatever applies to you. I will be providing a guide on how to complete the scorebook. To start off, you will write Mullen under the site section before the game would start, as well as the date. The start time for varsity will typically be at 6 or 6:30. And you will write this in military time. And the end time you will write after the game is over, but in this case, let's say it's at 7. Okay. Next, you will write the name of the two teams. Typically on your left will be Mullen. And for example, I will use Bear Creek. The referees will call in captains before the game starts while all the players are warming up, and during that meeting they will decide who gets the first serve. The first serve can be marked in either of these two spots. Now for this example, let's say Mullen gets the first serve. Also, while the players are warming up, the two coaches will give you their lineups. To keep it easy, I'm just going to use 1 through 6, and you will write them here. And the numbers, you'll see Roman numeral numbers here, and those will correlate to the sheets that the coaches will hand to you. And you will do the same for Bear Creek. Along with the starting lineup, you will also get a libero. A libero is not going to start on the court, but they will be off to the side, and after the referee checks the court, they'll go in. But to mark the libero, there's going to be a little triangle right here and right here. And for this case, let's use number 7. Okay. Now, the game will have started. That's all you have to do before the game starts. Afterward, once it's started, let's say Mullen gets the first point. First, you will cross off the number here. This is the most important part. If you lose track of this part, which we'll get into, that's fine. But the most important part is to keep track of this. Because if the score person loses track, they'll look over to you and you'll have this to tell them where they need to go. But like I said, Mullen won the first point, so you'll mark it here. Now let's say they win again, whether it's an ace or kill. You'll mark this first, then you'll come over here. Now let's say on the next point, Bear Creek sides out. So on Mullen, you're going to have a little dash there to indicate that their service run is over. And Bear Creek, you'll mark off their first one, and you'll write a 1 here. Now, for Bear Creek, this first person is going to be serving. So let's say they get an ace. So you mark off there, it gets here. And then they get, let's say, another point. Then you mark it here, and then Mullen sides out. So you'll have the dash there. You cross off a 3 here for Mullen, and then you write under the next line who, for the Roman numeral 2, who is going to be the next server. Then let's say it's an immediate side out. Okay. And then you'll give Bear Creek a point. And then similarly, the 4 is going to go under the Roman numeral number 2 to indicate that that's their next server. Then let's say they go on a very long point run. and Mullen decides to call a timeout. The T is going to go under the last server because if it's on this side, we'll get into why a little bit, but it cannot go on this side. It has to go under here. And then you'll have a TX over here. So you'll always put the T on the side that calls the timeout and the TX on the side that did not call the timeout, or just the opponent. And if you ever forget any of those things, there is a key up here to help you out. Now, let's say in this case, Mullen sided out after that timeout. Then you'll have the line there. You'll cross out the 4 and give Mullen the point. Now, I'm going to skip forward a little bit and just say that, just going to go through and say there's a bunch of back and forths. Don't forget to cross that one out. So, Mullen just sided out and we're at the bottom. So what we're going to do is you're going to go all the way back up here, and to the right of the dash, you're going to write an 8. Now this is why it's important that you write the T under the next server and not on this side, because if you were to write it on, if we originally wrote it up here, it would be saying that the timeout was called after this 8th point and not after the 3rd point here. So now, I forgot to mention this earlier, but when the timeout is called, you'll write up here, and the score at this time was 3-7. And you'll write it in these boxes. Each side gets 2 timeouts, and you will always write the side's point first. So for a Mullen timeout, you'll always write Mullen score first, and for the visiting team, you'll always write their score first. So let's say Bear Creek calls a timeout right here. You write the T here and the TX there. And then you'd write the score, which would be 11-8. Okay. Next is going to be substitutions. So let's say that Mullen decides to sub in number 8 for 2. Then you would, in the column to the right of their starting lineup, you're going to write an 8 next to 2. And then down here, you'll cross off number 1. Now let's say over on Bear Creek, they substitute 9 for 5. Then similarly, you'll write the 9 next to the 5, and you'll cross out the 1. Each team is allotted 18 substitutions in a game per set. Now usually these substitutions are not entirely used up, but if a game is very back and forth like we demonstrated right here, then that may happen. Now, just for purposes, let's say Mullen wins this set. So they go all the way to 25, and the whole thing happened here. Let's say it was all on number 2 and we just went all the way to 25. Then you'll write here under the final score 25-11, which is clearly marked here with the 11. Now, if Bear Creek was to have won the set, then and Mullen had 11, then you'd switch and you'd write 11-25. So the score is going to match this side that it's on. And then to set up for the next set, typically they have not been switching sides for recently after COVID, so you can write them on the same sides. But if that is changed, then you can wait to see if they switch. And whoever started with the serve in the first set will not have the serve in the second set. So since Mullen started in the first set, Bear Creek will start with their serve in the next set. And then similarly, they will give you their lineup and you will complete things just as you did in the first one. Now, further to add on to the substitutions, whenever you write to the right of them, you have to cross off the original player. Now, let's say they get all the way back around and 5 would go in for 9 again for Bear Creek. Then you'll cross off 9 and you'll cross off another substitution mark. Similarly for Mullen, if 2 goes back in, you cross off 8 and you cross off another substitution. Now, officials will have to sign under this box after every set, and they will go through here to make sure that you have everything filled out correctly. And these comment sections you can ignore. You do not have to write anything under there.